Welcome to the Life on Purpose podcast, conversations that explore holistic health, intentional living, learning, and growing. I'm your host, Brandy Eilert. All right, welcome back to the Life on Purpose podcast, where today my guest is a practitioner of mine and friend of mine, and I'm so excited to have him on to finally have all the conversations that we have every time we're in the office together. But today I have Dr. John Bennett, who is a chiropractor with extensive training in clinical nutrition. He's also a speaker, coach, and educator. So welcome. I'm so glad we are finally recording a conversation together.
Hey man, I love it, Brandy. This is awesome. I'm super excited to be on with you today. So,
well, we always kind of nerd out every time, I come into the office to get care from you. So I figured we might as well record it and let everybody hear kind of our nerdy conversations.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So today, where I really wanted to start with you, you are a chiropractor with training in clinical nutrition. Mm-hmm. People don't necessarily really understand that you are not just a back doctor, right? You are not just a bone doctor, a skeletal doctor. There is a lot of kind of neurological care. And the topic that I wanted to get into today was the topic of adrenal dysfunction, fatigue, whatever you want to call it. There are several names for it. And the fact that there are areas of medicine that don't recognize it, whereas kind of on like your side of medicine, you do, and many other practitioners do as well. And it's something that is very close to my heart because it is something that I struggle with quite a bit. So let's dive into kind of chiropractic care in relation to kind of your neurological systems.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a great place to start. Chiropractic was first discovered in 1895. And it's interesting that you say that because most people that do walk into a chiropractor's office, if we went to Walmart and screened 100 people walking through the door and said, what does a chiropractor do? They said, well, they're back pain, arm pain, neck pain. And the reality is chiropractic never started as that. Matter of fact, the first chiropractic patient was a deaf person. Harvey Lillard. Dr. Palmer made an adjustment on this individual. He found a problem in his neck. This guy had lost his hearing due to an accident. And he made an adjustment to this bump that he had on his neck. And this gentleman's hearing came back. Wow. So he's like, wow, how'd that happen? And what's going on there? And so Dr. Palmer he was into a lot of different types of healing. And he was super efficient at taking notes and documenting things. And so that's where he started really studying the spinal system and nerve system. We know that the brain connects every tissue in the body and it communicates this energy or information via the nerve system. And so you got nerves that literally go to every tissue or cell in your body. And so when there's interference on those nerves, and by interference, I mean pressure, that pressure can come from a bone being displaced. It can come from muscles being tight. It can come from chemical irritation to the nerve. It slows the impulse from the brain to the tissue cell. So imagine, I tell my people in the office, it's like a cell phone service, especially here in West Virginia, right? So you cut in and out all the time. You get a little bit of the signal, but you're not getting all of it. So you hear some of the message, but not all. And as a result of that, the body begins to suffer with it. So I always tell people when we start in our office that although most people think we're a back doctor, in actuality, I'm a nerve system doctor. So my job is to assess the body to find out, is there any type of interference on this nerve system that's shutting down that natural nerve impulse from the brain to the tissue cell? And by the way, from the tissue cell back to the brain. So like if your organ's suffering, it can talk back to the brain and say, hey, I need X, Y, Z. I'm not working right down here. And so when that communication works at its highest levels, that's what optimal health is. And so when chiropractic was developed, Dr. Palmer used to say that those causes of what we call subluxation, that interference on the nerve system, can be physical, which are the ones most people associate with me: slips, falls, accidents, bad posture, things like that. Or they can be chemical in nature, the foods that we eat, maybe things that we're putting into our body, or things that we're lacking so that our systems aren't working right. And we get, natural buildup of toxins in our body, or they can be emotional. So that could be work and relationships and, everything that we're dealing with on a daily basis. And so stress has always been around. Stress has always been a primary component of chiropractic. And it was taught when I went to school, my goodness, I've been in practice 31 years. So, 30 some years ago, it was taught to us physical, chemical, and emotional subluxation, but a lot of chiropractors, because there was so much pressure from the American Medical Association saying, you guys can't take care of all these different things. They basically said, if you take care of back pain, arm pain, neck pain, we'll leave you be. And this really went to federal court and the whole 9 yards. We had a whistleblower in the AMA that said, listen, they're trying to stomp out chiropractic care and everything else. And so when that twist or turn happened, it was kind of a division in chiropractic. You have a lot of people that say, we're just going to stick with musculoskeletal. And then you have people like myself that say, we're going to preach the message of overall health. I think the misconception also, Brandy, comes where chiropractors don't treat disease. Right. Like, in other words, Dr. Palmer wasn't treating deafness. What he was saying is there's interference on that nerve system. And so you've got to be cautious, as I tell other chiropractors and my patients also. You come to me with X, Y, Z. People say, well, can Dr. Bennett help people with cancer? Well, chiropractic doesn't treat cancer, but that person with cancer has a nerve system, right? And if there's interference on that nerve system, that body can't function well. So that's what we do in chiropractic. So stress becomes the primary underlying cause of physical, chemical, and emotional subluxations that happen in the body. And thus, the gland that addresses most of our stress issue is the adrenal glands. And that's what leads us to adrenal glands and how it ties into chiropractic care.
So let's go back to kind of this AMA kind of attack on chiropractic care. Is this when kind of this stigma on chiropractors kind of started? Because let's just be honest, there is like this stigma on chiropractic care, kind of, you're not really a doctor, all the, things that are said, but, and having to be really careful about how you approach what kind of care that you give.
Yeah.
Does this also play into the area of, adrenal fatigue doesn't exist in certain areas, and then it exists kind of in more of the holistic side of medicine?
Yeah, well, two parts to that question. So the first one, the stigma on chiropractors. So Dr. Palmer, D.D. Palmer, was the founder of chiropractic. His son, BJ, was the one that really developed chiropractic and took it to the next level. Yeah. And BJ and D.D. would often talk about man physical and man spiritual.
Yeah.
Right. And so they said, well, you guys are quacks and charlatans. You can't be talking about religion and medicine together, because you have to remember, at that time, if you look back in history, there was a time when medicine and religion or spirituality was together. And there was a separation of the church and medicine. And so the scientific world said, we'll take care of this, you take care of the spiritual side. Interesting enough, look where we're at right now. Now it's all back to the other thing. They're all saying, oh, physical, spiritual, it's all one entity. So
what's really interesting, and I have mentioned it on, and I can't remember, what specific episodes, but, it feels to me that this explosion in chronic health issues feels like there is very much a spiritual component to it, as in, are we so spiritually depleted that we manifest disease easier? And I don't just mean like religion, I just mean like connection to yourself, connection to earth, connection to, the natural order of things. Are we so disconnected that this is why we have kind of this explosion in disease? And I think that's a very complicated, it's way more complicated than that. However, it does feel like separating the two is completely counterproductive.
Yeah. Well, let's make it easy for our audience. I mean, you hit the nail on the head right there. So the reality is, BJ used to call it the grand overall designer, God, G-O-D, right? So there's this intelligence in your body. When the sperm and egg come together, there's this life that's formed in the body, and you don't have to teach that body for the heart to beat or the lungs to fill up. It knows there's an intelligence running it. Right. I tell people all the time, if you don't believe me, whatever you call it, whether you call it God or the great wisdom or innate intelligence or universal intelligence, cut your finger and wrap it with a Band-Aid. Now, although I don't advocate it, you could eat peanut butter and jelly every day and new skin tissue will form on that finger.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing, an eyeball won't grow out the tip of the finger. So there is an intelligence running this thing, right? And so what Palmer said was, when the connection between man physical and man spiritual is interrupted, then the body can't function in homeostasis. It doesn't work as well as it's designed to do. And that I mean, that's always held true. I think it's what you said there was that it's becoming more evident because people are looking for things saying, it's not, and I'm not anti-medicine by any means. I mean, medicine serves a purpose, but there's so many other things
Right.
that can help that you have to look at it. And it amazes me, even my medical doctor friends will talk about it. And it amazes me when they come out and they've done all they can, they look at the patient and they say, well, it's in God's hands now. Well, it's always been in God's hands. Right? Like we're blessed to be working with that power that animates the living world. And so I tell people, do you have more faith in a spoonful of medicine or the power that, fends the fish and makes the trees grow and everything else? And again, they all serve a purpose. Don't get me wrong. My goodness, I thank goodness that we have great surgeons and thank goodness that we have different medicines that work for, situations, but that's not what health's about.
Right. And I think, and similar to you, I've always advocated, especially on this show I am also not anti-medicine. I actually have created my own team that includes traditional medicine, holistic medicine. I utilize it all. I think where we could do better is merging them together more and having an understanding that we need kind of the whole picture of what health is. And I again, wherever that happened in the separating, is, in my opinion, where we kind of started to fail.
I agree. So I think, and my goodness, we could just talk for hours on this. This is crazy. We're going to have to schedule like multiple things here.
I know.
So that really is what you're talking about. There's a difference in two approaches. So a medical approach is more mechanistic, right? So one area of the body can't affect other areas of the body. I'm sorry. The chiropractic approach is more vitalistic in nature, right? So vitalism is about your body being able to create these things that we don't really know how to measure yet, but like it happens, right? You can give the best scientist in the world everything that he needs to create cells, but yet we can't create life. Right. So we know that there's something that is doing that, and that's the subtle substance that we work with every day. Now, the second part of that question you asked, interesting enough, was, do I think that's where this disruption between primary adrenal insufficiency or adrenal dysregulation or adrenal fatigue has happened with it? And I really don't think that is. I think really that happened within medicine itself. So in the early 1900s, the grandfather of endocrinology, they would call Henry Harrower, who was a medical physician who really at that time was studying how the endocrine system works and all of these things. And what Dr. Harrower found was that when organs suffer, they don't work real well. Right. So real similar, to the chiropractic type philosophy there. And he actually began to dive into practical endocrinology and organ therapy. And that's where the separation happened. So some people embraced that and said, oh, wow, but this is really cool and we're going to work with it. And other people said, oh, no, that's glandular treatment, because he got into how do I support the glands in the body so that they can produce their own hormones and they can function better. And I think that's where the big divide happened. So as a result of that, medicine looks at adrenal insufficiency as Addison's disease only, which is very rare, by the way. I mean, if you look at the research on Addison, it's
dangerous, right?
And it can be dangerous, sure, but it's a very rare process. And so oftentimes what I'll have, and you've got to be cautious again in the words that you use with your clients, because if I have a client that leaves and goes back to their physician and says, well, Dr. Bennett is helping me with my adrenal insufficiency, then you're gonna have someone say, well, that doesn't even exist.
Right.
And there really is two schools of it.
Right. And I think it's very confusing to people. And I talk to people, kind of in the area that I coach in is very, very much linked to this adrenal insufficiency, this chronic stress, this area. And it does become very frustrating and confusing for people when you have one school of thought saying this doesn't exist at all, like your practitioner or your coach is a quack. Oh, and this area saying, okay, this is what's going on. You have adrenal insufficiency and this is what you need to do. It's very, very confusing. So I think it's very important for people to understand that there is two schools. And if, you have a practitioner who's working with you in kind of healing this area and it's starting to work, and you're not using any kind of dangerous techniques, what difference does it make if if you're feeling better, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
You know, that's the whole purpose, right? You just want to feel good.
What's the end game? And not only feel good, right? So let's think about that for a second. I had a new patient in yesterday we were talking about, and she came to us for back pain. And I said, listen, my job as a practitioner is to tell you there's multiple ways you can get rid of this.
Yeah.
Right. You can go to physical therapy route with exercise. You can go medicine route for pain relief. I said, you can go to Aldi's and buy a couple bottles of cheap wine. You'll get rid of your back pain. You have a headache the next day, but maybe the back pain will be gone, right? Yeah. So the end game really is, can you function better? Can you do the things you want to do for as long as you want to do them, right? At whatever level you want to do them. That's to us what optimal health's about.
Right.
So, that's the key. Interesting enough, you said something about, we were talking about different schools of thought with adrenal insufficiency and all that. And so right before we jumped online, I just went to PubMed. So I use NCBI or PubMed a good bit. And I simply went to the search bar and typed in adrenal dysregulation. There's over 2,500 different articles or citations on adrenal dysregulation. So to say it doesn't exist is
so
ridiculous.
You're saying it's real?
And listen, that's not Dr. Bennett's studies, right? That is individuals that are looking at, studies or concepts or ideas of how does this affect. So I even went a little bit deeper with that. I said, okay, so since we just went through this whole COVID pandemic, how does COVID affect the adrenal glands? How does the COVID vaccine affect the adrenal glands? And I hopefully we can just touch on that for a second. If you were to Google COVID and adrenal dysregulation, you're going to see over 50 different articles already that say the adrenal glands are affected with how the body can handle COVID and what has COVID, the vaccine, actually done for not only adrenal problems, but like also in your realm or big in your realm, autoimmunity. So COVID 100. And autoimmunity, there's over 2,200 different articles on COVID and autoimmune disease. I mean, think about that.
And I actually have somebody, so in the coaching practice that that I work within, I actually have a client right now who is dealing with the effects of COVID itself. She actually she decided not to get the COVID-19 vaccine because of how poorly, she was feeling after having COVID on her nervous system. So that does not shock me. I would actually really love to read those. But yeah, I mean, kind of even going into, kind of back to the fact that, there are all of these articles on its existence. Mm-hmm. How then, I guess, how then do you approach adrenal dysfunction, adrenal dysregulation with a patient that comes in? Absolutely. Someone comes in and has, okay, let's start here. Let's start with, how does it present? So someone comes in and said, these are all the issues I'm having. How does it present? What does somebody look for?
You bet. So it's the primary complaints that most people deal with that walk through our front door. They're fatigued, they're tired, they have an inability to lose weight, they've lost their sex drive, their digestion is suffering. We might see blood pressure dysregulation problems with them, high or low blood pressure problems. Oftentimes those patients are then put on a multitude of medications to try to alter those different symptoms. Mm-hmm. And so, again, there's certain testing that we look for on that when a person comes in to say, and I think the key is the word that you used, adrenal dysregulation. It's not insufficiency. So adrenal insufficiency is true Addison's disease. And why they call that primary adrenal insufficiency, as you probably know, is that it's a problem with the adrenal gland. Yeah. But you've got to realize that the adrenal gland is under the control of the pituitary and the hypothalamus. So you can have other, and so again, let's look at those two just briefly here. So primary adrenal insufficiency means the gland itself is not producing enough of the hormones, primarily aldosterone, which would control your sodium potassium balance and blood pressure, water, fluid, things like that, and cortisol, which is the stress hormone that most of us know. Yeah. And probably the greatest example of true Addison's disease was one of our past presidents, John F. Kennedy, who suffered from Addison's disease. And so I knew that. Yeah. So with that, your dysregulation of cortisol, you can't respond real well to stress. Mm-hmm. And then you see a variety of these other problems come about. And that can be an acute situation, severe stress, or it can be a chronic situation where you see the gland suffer. Now with adrenal dysregulation, you're looking at how is the adrenal gland functioning, right? You're not saying it's insufficient. It's not maybe not producing enough of its hormones, but are the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland not working well to tell the adrenal gland what it needs to do? And so thus that becomes the issue or problem. So I think the key to that when we talk to a patient about it is explain to them, we're not dealing with an insufficiency here. We're dealing with a gland that's just not functioning well. It's dysregulated. Could be hyper, it could be hypo. And so stress is the ultimate cause of that. And if we can, it's like I tell people all the time, I can't get rid of your stress,
right?
But I can make you better at stress. So if you can respond to stress, right, and then come back to homeostasis, that's what true health's about. The interesting thing, going back to Henry Harrower, he was the first one to say that you can't have just an adrenal gland problem because the adrenal gland affects the thyroid and the thyroid affects the gonads and the pituitary. And so they're like four legs on a table. And if one of those legs is weak, you ever went to a restaurant and that table wobbles, they get underneath and they stick a couple napkins in to kind of balance it out. Well, that's kind of the medical approach to it. Adrenals weak, let's do something to the adrenals. Or you've got low sex drive, let's give you something for sex drive. Or infertility. Or if you have, let's say, low metabolism, let's go for your thyroid and figure out what's happening and going on with thyroid. And so when you look at things like Hashimoto's or thyroiditis and all that, Harrower again was the one that says that may not be the primary cause. Maybe the thyroid's suffering because this adrenal gland's not working right up here. Or maybe the gonads aren't working right. Or so you got to look at all of it together.
Interestingly enough, as long as I've been dealing with my autoimmunity and kind of my adrenal dysregulation, everything points to the fact, you always ask the chicken or the egg, what came first. For me, I 100% believe that it was the adrenal issue that kind of affected the thyroid issue. Whether I can prove that or not, that's kind of beside the point. But there's not a time that I can remember where I wasn't somewhat intolerant to stress as a child, kind of traumatic events, like all of these things. So I do want to touch on that. I kind of want to touch on the why and the how, but I want to go back to something that you said. Can we talk a little bit about kind of the pituitary hypothalamus, how that all plays into, again, chicken or the egg? What is the dysfunction there, or is it indeed the adrenals?
Yes. And so the answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't matter. Again, it's not like it matters, but I think when people want to understand the approach to how it's being quote unquote treated, I
totally get it. So I always say the best place to start is in the beginning. So when I sit down with a client, you've got to trace that entire pathway back.
Yeah.
Okay. So for our listeners that are on here, if you were to, and by the way, I'll give you a link to a chart that shows Harrower's, it's called Harrower's endocrine chart, and it shows those relationships and how they inhibit and stimulate those other organs. I'd be happy to post that for you.
Yes, please do.
So your audience can go to it. But so there's three different axes there. There's the hypothalamic pituitary axis, the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid, and hypothalamic pituitary gonadal, or HPG, HPT, or HPA, as we call it.
Yeah.
So think of the hypothalamus. It's a little almond-sized gland in the brain that has a direct control over the pituitary. Okay, so like it's the master that tells the pituitary, here's what I want you to do. And it does it through hormone. That's how glands communicate or talk. So if that hypothalamus is not communicating well with the pituitary, then the pituitary can't do its job to tell the other glands how to function right.
Right.
Okay. And same way the pituitary. So let's say it's able to talk to the pituitary, but the pituitary now can't get the information out to the rest of the glands. I was thinking about this as I was thinking, okay, we're going to talk here at the end of the week, and I'm driving through West Virginia, and we know we're pothole nation around here, right? And everyone's so frustrated. They're like, I don't know why our road crew doesn't do something. And I got to thinking, I said, this is HPA axis.
Yeah.
So the governor, right, tells the state road commission that we can do, or division of highways that we can do this, and then the division of highway tells the locals, here's what we have. Right. So we can yell at the local guys, but if they don't have the tools or equipment, right, to do it, in other words, it's not coming from division of highways, they can't do their job. They can't fix the holes. Right. So or let's say the division of highways, our legislators and the governor has not created a budget well enough for them to have the equipment to do what they want, then that's your HPA axis. like I love explaining things to people in simple ways. Like, so my patients don't want to know about, I tell practitioners I teach, your clients don't want to know everything that you know. They just want to know that you know, and then can communicate it in a way that they can understand. Like people say, oh, okay, I get that about the potholes. It might not be our local guy's problem, right? It might be the fact they're just not getting the goods or, you know, the cold patch or the equipment they need to fix those holes. So
it's very literally not coming from the top.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
the communication is stunted there somewhere. It's a communication issue.
So where's that gland located?
Yeah.
Full circle here. That gland's located in the brain. Pituitary sets, it's a pea-sized gland, sets right underneath of it. So it always starts in the brain, which is what Dr. Palmer said, full circle, right? So the brain stem is talking to the rest of the body. And if there's that disconnect there, it can't function well.
Right.
So that, you know, adrenal dysregulation, if you really look at it, is chiropractic in a nutshell. It deals with physical, chemical, emotional stress. Yeah. And you have to address all those. And so again, you know, as a postgraduate teacher for chiropractors, nutritionists, medical doctors, I always tell chiropractors, a lot of chiropractors will focus on just the back stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're taking care of maybe the physical part of it, but you're never addressing the chemical or the emotional part of it. And by no means am I a therapist. Right. So if I see a person that has an underlying emotional type issue, let's connect them with the best therapist we can in our area to help them through those things, or they're never going to achieve overall health. And I think that's kind of what you said. You have a team of people that you work with. That's how you have to look at it. Sure.
Yeah, no. And again, that's kind of, you know, my approach too is find the help that you need. And that's kind of how I see myself as well. I love having resources, and I love having resources to share with people.
Sure.
And especially when it comes to practitioners, again, having a team behind you is extremely important because it is an overall picture here that you're looking at. I want to touch on something a little bit as far as the why and the how.
Sure.
And let's start, you say you go all the way back to the beginning. So is this dysregulation, can it be caused from something, or I guess not caused per se, but can it start way back as a child?
Absolutely.
You know, things are simple as a kid. What do I have to be stressed about kind of situation? But, you know, is it something that you can be born with a certain amount of stress? Is there kind of a gestational stress you carry? You know, what does that look like?
Yeah. So it's a great question. And the answer to that is absolutely. That's what we do with our knee-to-knee consultation. I try to go back and find the stressors or the major life-changing events that happen to someone. And you kind of mentioned that with yourself. You know, childhood stress, it could be a crisis, a loss of a loved one. I think the other thing that people need to realize is that stress can be a good thing too. You celebrate a big victory. You know, right now we have the state basketball tournament going on and everything. And I can remember my son played and the emotions, he was so excited to play that game and stuff, but our whole team was sick afterwards because they were so excited about doing it. Yeah. It was a stress to their system. That's called eustress. It's a good stress. Now, this stress can be, you know, events that happen in our life, emotional events that may happen in our life, or what we see a lot of times, especially in our area around here, is subpar nutrition. Yeah. So, you know, our kids are being fed these things that are food-like products, but they're not really food. They're synthetic man-made substances that, you know, might be high in calorie, but they're not really loaded in nutrients. Mm-hmm. And so as a result of that, you begin to starve these glands. They don't function real well. And then that can be an underlying issue. And then again, think about, I know you have children and you know, they've been in the office and everything else. Yeah. Think about it when they're little. They're falling. They, you know, my goodness, I can remember my kids falling off bunk beds and off couches and running into the walls and right, like constantly. And like, oh my goodness, I'm a horrible parent. So oftentimes those things go undetected because that you never see the need. Well, why would I take my kid to a chiropractor? Right. You know, he just fell or he got hit by a baseball or he got, you know, he's playing sports or whatever it may be, or even the birth process itself. I mean, you can speak to that. I've never been through it, but you as a female have, and that can be a very traumatic event.
Well, and just a personal story, you know, I brought my daughter in to see you because she also had kind of it wasn't a traumatic birth, but she had torticollis. Mm-hmm. her head was or one of the muscles in her neck was very tight. So her head kind of tilted, and we had, to work on that. It's something that she still deals with to this day, as having kind of this tightness in her neck and shoulders, but also for the nutrition part of it, because as many tools as I have and as much knowledge as I have on nutrition for my own children, they don't want to listen to me. So taking them to someone like you, she is more apt to listen to you than to me. But again, we saw you for multiple purposes, functional and nutritional.
Yeah.
Kind of like the whole picture there. And she, again, was way more apt to listen to you than to me.
Yeah. Well, my kids are the same way, right? So they'll listen to someone else. They force so they won't listen to us. That's the joys of being a parent.
Sure.
But so interesting enough, you said something there. So you think about that, and although it wasn't listed as a traumatic childbirth, there was dysregulation to the musculoskeletal system that could definitely have caused nerve interference.
Yes.
Now, you can work through the muscular type thing. You can help with the posture, but if that nerve interference remained there, and let's say that adrenal gland was not getting 100% signal from the nerve system, now you have an individual that may be 10, 12, 15 years old that has had adrenal dysregulation for a long period of time. Right. And so now all of a sudden the problem shows up, and what we think, all of us, right? I had nothing going on before. One day I wake up with this symptom. It had to be something that happened yesterday, or it had to be something that happened right now. And in reality, it could have been something that occurred in your past. And oftentimes these things will take place and we really don't categorize them. We don't chart them down or whatever. So I really try to ask questions to get people to think back. What have you went through that's causing a problem? It amazes me, Brandy. It happens all the time that they'll say, oh no, I've never had an accident. And then they'll come back the next visit and they'll say, I was in a car wreck where it flipped over 3 or 4 times. You think that could be an issue? I'm like, how do you forget that? But the reality is we do.
Yeah.
Right.
And I feel like sometimes it's a protective mechanism. Again, and like on the personal side of things for me, my father took his own life when I was 11 years old. It was very traumatic. However, I had this tendency of saying, I'm fine. Push it down, keep going. I kind of became a perfectionist. I had perfectionist tendencies, which was also a very big stressor for me. Kind of just, it manifested in these weird ways, but I would never admit that was the thing that was, the biggest issue for me. Right. Which obviously, anybody looking at my life would be like, yeah, that was pretty bad. So yeah, I think that we tend to kind of try to protect ourselves from those bad emotions that come with, from traumatic events. And you also think, okay, well, I was a kid when that happened. Surely, everyone wants to say that children are so resilient, and well, they are obviously. However, their emotional health is paramount. And again, that's something, we can really dive into too, with kind of this dysregulation that can start in childhood.
And I just want to touch on this. I mean, I don't want to spend a tremendous amount of time, but what we've done to our children over the last couple of years, with mandates of masks, with social separation, not distancing, separation.
Yes.
Right. That is, in my opinion, that's criminal. We've created an emotional stress that's so overwhelming for these kids, and we don't know how they're going to adapt to that. And so I tell all my, chiropractic friends and people that practice in functional medicine and functional nutrition, things like that, you better roll your sleeves up, because we're going to be so busy over the next 5, 10, 15 years, wondering what's going to happen. And we're not going to see it as a kid. A kid's not going to come to you and say, Mom, I'm emotionally stressed out because of this. You're going to see disconnection. You're going to see depression. You're going to see anxiety. You're going to see lowered immunity. You're going to see a rise in autoimmunity. And it's going to skyrocket from thyroid problems to leaky gut to blood glucose dysregulation and the whole 9 yards. And that to me is the part that is so nerve-wracking, because so many people understood and knew that, but yet we allowed policies to dictate how we're going to handle certain situations without the thought of what are the consequences of that, right? What is the greater consequence of that?
Well, and, I will say this, a part of, so I did a lot of work when I kind of got my quote unquote diagnosis of adrenal dysregulation, to really heal and to get better, to feel better, to kind of get back into balance. And I will say the stress that I experienced during this pandemic in relation to my children and what I had to do to them to keep them in school sent me back into kind of that dysregulation again. It was, and it was something that I've really had to work with. And I again, I was seeing you weekly, because I was having a hard time reconciling something I did not believe in doing to my children. But then also, having these choices of, okay, well, I can do it differently, but then they weren't happy. They didn't understand. They felt like it was a punishment.
Sure.
Okay, I can homeschool and you don't have to do these things, but you're still separated from your friends. You're still different. You're still getting taught by mom and not your teacher. Right. So there was no good answers for us parents in this. And I think, for us, like kids aside and what we're going to see happen to them, which again, one of my children, my older children, handled it way better than another. And I really worry about what we're going to see, but I really appreciate, and I will say this, I really appreciate practitioners like you who had the foresight to see where this was going and to also, know that you're going to have quite the task on your hands in these next few years.
Yeah. And, just touching on something you said there, it's affected all of us. Yeah. Right. I love the vulnerability. You can say, listen, this caused problems with me. Myself, I just share a little bit with myself. I've never had a problem with my hair. After the stress of dealing with clients and the mandates and all this other stuff, I started to lose my hair because stress was, so I'm a guy that teaches about stress, right? I have all the tools in my office. I see the practitioners that I recommend, and yet it still affected my HPA axis and my stress response. Yeah. And so we're none of us are immune to it, right? We can just recognize it and make ourselves better at it. Right. And I think the key to that is, and this kind of gets into the how now, how do I know that I have it? How do I know that's even affected me? And I think that's the part that you wanted to talk about, the how do we recognize it? What are the signs I can look for? And then most importantly, once I find these signs, are there things that I can do? Yeah. What are the tools? What are the tools that are out there that might be able to help me deal with some of this stuff? So one of the symptoms that you mentioned that I don't think is often talked about, and it was confusing for me, one of the major signs before I kind of figured out what was going on with me was hair shedding, like just crazy hair shedding. Sure. Why is that kind of a sign, and kind of the weight gain? And I guess let's kind of go through the symptoms and then, the testing part of it. How do you test for it? Yeah, you got it. So if you look at the summary effects of stress, there's a variety of things that take place. And as we delve into this, I want to go again, I always go back to Henry Harrower's work. The HPA axis is a stress response. That's your fight or flight response. And true homeostasis, you cannot be in fight or flight and rest and repair at the same time. Right. Homeostasis or health is balancing between those two. So in other words, gas pedal, brake pedal. I've got to be able, it's just like driving your car. I've got to be able to use the gas, but also got to be able to slow down. Yeah. Right. So rest and repair is that HPT thyroid and HPG gonad axes, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes people will have symptoms like of thyroid derangement, which sometimes people say, well, hair loss, that's a thyroid type problem. Metabolism, inability to maintain or lose weight, that's a thyroid problem. Yeah. Well, again, back to what Harrower said, it may be signs or symptoms of a thyroid, but if I'm in an elevated stress response, your body doesn't really care about your hair right now. It says, what do I mean by stress response? And maybe I ought to do that. Let's say you're at the zoo. You go to the zoo, you're walking around, you're having a great day. And all of a sudden they say, tiger's out of the cage. Well, you're like, you go in, I got to get away from the tiger, right? Before this thing kills me, or yada, yada, yada. So HPT, your metabolism, your digestion, you don't say, oh my goodness, honey, tiger's out of the cage, but I'm feeling hungry. We should stop and get something to eat, right? Or you don't turn around and say, HPG, my goodness, I'm getting chased by a tiger, but my sex drive's really ramped up. I'm feeling really frisky right now. So when I see these symptoms, people come into my office, they say, I have low libido, I have low sex drive, I have inability to lose weight, which is what brings most clients in when they're from a functional standpoint, right? My weight, my digestion's bad. I've tried every diet in the world. It's not working. I've infertility. I don't know how many women we've helped become pregnant, not by dealing with gonadal hormones, but by making them better at stress. Yeah. Because their adrenal responses, they're constantly in fight or flight. There's no way they can be in rest and repair, and there's no way procreation can happen there because those glands are just shut down. Right. And so you've got to find that balance between the two. And the easiest way is to go back to the primary culprit, hypothalamic pituitary, and stress. Yeah. Because even in chronic disease, my goodness, if you look at heart disease, diabetes, cancer, let's just take the top 3 that happen in the United States. They say that chronic stress is the underlying contributing factor in all 3 of those. Right. Right. So again, I'm not treating heart disease. I'm not treating diabetes, but if I can regulate your stress response to make you better, I guess, cage the tiger of stress, right? Put the tiger back in the cage, right?
Put the tiger back in the cage. Right?
There you go. I'm a tiger tamer. I guess there we go. There's my new title. So anyhow, if I can help with that, then all those other functions in your body work the way they're designed to work, and then you see those clear up. So what does that look like? So the summary of stress itself, you'll see high cortisol levels, you might see high heart rate, you might see vasoconstriction or high blood pressure, inability to break down proteins real well, or even the loss of lean muscle mass, sensory sensitivity. So people that things that may have not bothered them before, now they're super sensitive to. They have increased pain. They have, I'm dealing with headaches that I've had all the time. They have a little bit of bone loss. Insulin resistance is a big one. Right. They can't handle their sugars real well now, which is a whole response, by the way, of cortisol, which we can, talk about here just briefly, but immunity drops, anabolic hormones, again, not being able to produce good lean muscle mass, short-term memory and confusion, lightheadedness upon rising, fatigue. I just, doc, I'm so drained. I get home, I just want to sit on the couch and do nothing. Yeah. Right. I can't get out of bed in the morning. These are all signs that you could potentially have an HPA axis problem.
You listed probably the majority of mine. Blood sugar regulation, the dizziness upon standing, yeah.
So those are all signs or red flags that you should be somewhere talking to someone saying, hey, can this be now there's other things that can cause that. Sure. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. There's other things can cause. So for instance, if I have a person that's 100 pounds overweight and they have adipose tissue around their blood vessels, blood pressure is going to have to go up. The heart's a pump. It's going to say, I got to get blood there. So I'll sacrifice a little bit of pressure, epithelial damage, to just raise the pressure. So, but again, is like you said, what comes first, chicken or the egg? Is it really the weight gain that's the issue, or is it the stress that's not allowing the person to lose that weight? Like, even weight loss. I tell people at our office, the way that society kind of looks at it is lose weight, get healthy. I tell them, listen, if you're healthy, the weight will come off. The reason that you're not seeing change in your weight is you're unhealthy. Let's get you healthy and then watch what happens to your weight.
Right. And oftentimes when you see, and again, this is kind of like the people that I work with, when you get your stress under control, you can, there is not much, obviously we have to do some kind of diet changing, but typically the biggest result they'll see is when they start working here, when they start working on their stress and their inner peace, and then it starts to fall off. And then we can really kind of hone in on the diet. But yeah, it's very fascinating that that's kind of one of the biggest triggers of holding on to that extra fat, because again, like you said, it's kind of this protective mechanism. I'm being chased by a tiger, or I'm in a very dangerous state. I'm going to hold on to this fat because I don't know, right, how I'm going to survive. That's exactly it. So what kind of, like, someone comes into your office, you suspect, you go through this very thorough process, you suspect adrenal dysregulation. What kind of testing what does that look like?
Yep. So the first part is I ask some very simple questions. Do you have any kind of problem when you get up too quickly? Do you get lightheaded? Mm-hmm. Driving at night, blur off the roads, whether it's raining or night, you have a difficult time seeing it. You notice yourself squinting. You have a sensitivity to light. right? So out in the sunshine, you constantly have to wear glasses because it affects your thinking. You can't focus real well.
Yeah.
Those are, underlying signs that an adrenal gland could not be working, or HPA axis could not be working the way it's designed to. And so if we see those kind of marks, I'll tell you another big one, because, oh, wow, we could really get into this. So if you look at the adrenal itself, so inside the adrenal gland, there's 3 different areas that produce different types of hormones. And kind of today we're talking about cortisol, but aldosterone is the other primary hormone, which is really sodium potassium balance in your body. Yeah. So one of the telltale signs of that area being dysregulated is the craving of salt. Yeah. People say, I don't crave sugar, I crave pretzels and chips, and that's a sign that I have an adrenal that is suffering, not producing that aldosterone real well, not being able to balance sodium potassium. Yeah. So from a cortisol standpoint, more so there, we ask them questions. What kind of trauma have you had in your life? What's happening? And it jars people's memory, and I'm able to list some of those things. And then we can dive a little deeper into those. So from that's subjective. You're telling me something, right? Yeah. You're telling me as your practitioner, this is what's happening. From an objective standpoint, there's some very simple tests. And of course, you can look even deeper into saliva testing, which we've done with patients before for cortisol levels and ADHEA or pituitary function. Or you can even look at blood testing. But there's some real simple ones you can do in the office. You can do one called a Ragland's test. And Ragland's test really looks at your blood pressure. So you lay a person on the table, you take their blood pressure, let's say it's 120/80 for simplicity. When I stand them up quickly, that blood pressure should raise 8 to 10 points. Now your heart can't adapt that quick. So it relies on your adrenal glands to release epinephrine to tell the heart, pump harder, get blood to my head so I don't get dizzy. So think about it. You're laying down, you stand up quickly, the adrenal gland suffering a little bit, just doesn't work real well, and you don't get that pump of blood. You'll get woozy for a second. That's where the lightheadedness comes from. And you can chart that, excuse me, on blood pressure. When I stand that person up, 120/80, it only goes to 122 instead of 128 or 130. That's adrenal gland dysregulation. Yeah. And so again, Dr. Ragland, and sometimes we'll use that even in a hospital type setting, postural hypotension and things of that nature to determine, is the adrenal functioning up to par. Pupillary response test. You can shine a light across the pupil, and we all know that when you do that, it should constrict. Right. This is what happens when people have a hard time driving at night or the bright sunlight. What will happen with that individual's pupil is it'll constrict, but then it starts to get big again. It dilates, and it's called an undulating pupil. It gets big, it gets small, it gets big, small. So you can imagine you're driving down the road, your pupil's constricting, it's dilating, and so all of a sudden you're squinting and you can't see real well. And that becomes the visual problems that we see. Yeah. So pupillary response is another great one. And then we have an instrument in our office called a heart sound recorder. So a heart sound recorder really looks at rate, rhythm, and tone of the heart. It's a stress monitor. So when your cortisol levels and epinephrine, norepinephrine, all that changes, the characteristics of your heartbeat are going to change, your rate, your rhythm, and your tone. And so one of the telltale signs on that heart sound recorder is that you'll see a second beat, S1, S2. So the first sound when the valves open up, the second sound when they close, is louder than the S1, the first sound. Yeah. And that's a telltale thing you can pick up. So then it's funny, Brandy, I always tell people the way I diagnose is pretty simple. If it looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Yeah. Right. So You're telling me this, I'm seeing this, we're seeing this when we look at your food journal. You're eating foods that may cause high sugars, you're eating foods that are saltier in nature, then we have a pretty good chance of knowing that there's some dysregulation going on there with the adrenal gland. So we just tie all those things together.
So I want to kind of go back to the heart.
Yeah, sure.
This is a really fascinating area for me. Can you actually feel that like flutter in your heart if you have, that was one of my telltale signs, because I was like, I feel like my heart is fluttering all the time. Yeah. So, is that something people can recognize in themselves? Like, the dizziness upon standing and kind of the heart flutter, or feeling like it skips a beat, and you're like in love and your heart skips a beat or whatever, but maybe no, I'm really just stressed out.
Well, hey, back to what we said though, right? You see a person, you're in love with the person, that's a good stress.
Yeah. Right.
All of a sudden, boom, my heart skips a beat. So yeah, you can feel things like that for sure. I think that really comes back to looking at what cortisol's primary role is. So So cortisol's primary role, when we have high blood sugar, the pancreas releases insulin to lower blood sugar, get it into the cells. Cortisol's job is one of the jobs of cortisol, I should say, is to create what's called gluconeogenesis. In other words, the production of glucose from non-sugar or non-carbohydrate things in the liver. It might be breakdown of amino acids from muscle. It might be fatty acids from adipose tissue, right? And so when cortisol levels are high, you got to kind of see that it dampens, if you will, the insulin response.
Right.
So what will happen with a lot of people with that adrenal, how they'll notice that with the adrenals, to get glucose into the cell, it has to be attached to a B vitamin. Okay. So B vitamin takes it through the ATP cycle. ATP is our energy in our cells and all that. Well, without B vitamins, that doesn't work real well. And it creates, it goes down a pyruvate chain that creates lactic acid and therefore fatigue and tiredness. So again, there's two schools of thought out there. One school of thought says, well, high blood sugars cause B vitamin deficiency. And the other one says, well, B deficiency can cause blood sugar problems. I don't really care. I just know that they're both related.
Right. Doesn't matter. Right.
So back to the heart. If I'm deficient in B vitamins, my electrical current to the heart muscle is not going to be a good contraction, or it may be sporadic. It might short out. That's the skip beat. That's the flutter that you'll feel in the heart. So oftentimes those adrenal patients or people that have that dysregulation will also see B vitamin deficiency and therefore the need for supplementation. They're not getting it through their diet. And that's kind of where supplements come in to be able to help with that situation also.
Right. And that was another area, I wanted to talk about today, because I feel like, people shy away from or get very intimidated by practitioners who want to throw a bunch of supplements at them. And again, this is kind of where it may be intimidating to come into a practice like yours, which again, I will say you are not one of those practitioners that I have felt like just wants to make money off of me and throw supplements at me. You work with whole food supplements. Can you talk a little bit about how supplements work in the context of healing adrenal dysfunction, and also how the supplements that you work with are different than because I guess supplements are not all created equal, right? Kind of like pharmaceuticals.
Sure.
So I guess wherever you want to start there.
Yeah. Okay. So I think how we tackle that is we first look at the need for supplementation. So is there truly a need for supplementation? And our philosophy always has been and will remain that you cannot out supplement a bad diet. Food always has been and always will be your best medicine. When God created the planet, everything that we need to survive is on here. And so when I started looking at supplementation, when I came back to West Virginia, I went to school down in Georgia, outside of Atlanta, Marietta Life University. And when I came back, I was born and raised here in Morgantown, West Virginia. And I came back working with my people. I was like, so the clients I work with in Georgia was a little bit different than back here. How come these people weren't responding as well? And so I went back to stressors again and found nutritional deficiency was a big one. Most people are raised on fast food. Most people are eating it daily. I do dietary assays and say, okay, so what do you eat that's green? Well, jelly beans. I eat green jelly beans. I eat, that's the reality is shamrock shakes.
Yeah.
Right. So what people are eating oftentimes is caloric dense foods, but not nutrient dense. Now, even if you're trying to do the right thing, right? Like we try to do the right thing, where we're getting our vegetables and fruits from, they're harvested or picked maybe across the country. They're shipped in trailers. By the time they hit our grocery store, they've been off the vine for a week, 10 days, who knows?
So they themselves are depleted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the minute the fruit leaves the vine, here we go again, that's biblical, right? When man's spiritual and physical is not connected anymore, you can't feed the system anymore. And it's the same thing. As soon as you pick that fruit from the vine, it's no longer getting the nutrients, micro minerals, the vitamins from the earth. Right. Seed the soil. That's what Dr. Lee at Standard Process always said. So if I have bad soil, I can't produce good offspring, good vegetable, good fruit, whatever it may be. And so, and this has even changed in you and I's lifetime. Because, what people would eat 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago is not, the broccoli you ate 50 years ago is not what you're eating right now.
Right.
And there's been multiple studies on that. Lots of people looking at, food nutrition have looked at the nutrient density of some of these foods. Not only that, we're now mass producing these things. How quickly can we grow them? Right? How fast can we grow them? How quickly can we grow them to feed more people? And we don't really look at the nutrient density of it. So people are eating the foods, they don't have nutrients in it. And I always tell people, I use supplements to plug holes, to plug gaps.
Right.
What I would love to see you do is change your lifestyle. I love to see you eat better. I love you to start, a plant-based diet, 60-some% plant, and then with good proteins and good healthy fats, and get rid of synthetic food. But the reality is, I know how hard that is with myself.
Yeah.
So how hard is it going to be for someone else, right? Your day's
Well,
chaotic,
especially
everything.
somebody who can't afford, because let's go back to where we live.
Yeah.
Our state, being completely honest, it struggles. It struggles socioeconomically, as far as like, if you were to tell somebody, all right, this is how you need to eat to be completely healthy and to really nourish your body, that's not feasible for most people.
True. And the times we're in right now, Brandy, look at the price of gasoline.
They're not going to get any easier.
You got it. So people are going to turn around and say, okay, now do I put gas in my car to take my kids to school and work? Or do I turn around and get, Brocco sprouts or broccoli or whatever?
Yeah.
I'll go for the white bread. I'll go for the Pop-Tarts. You look back at periods where we've had like catastrophic hurricanes and things like that, and you look at the foods that are the highest sales, it's things like man-made processed things like Pop-Tarts and things like that, that just don't have the nutrients that sustain life. That's what food should do, is sustain life.
Right.
And so as a result of that, there becomes the need for supplements. Now, your next question was, all supplements are not created equal. And that's so true. So Dr. Lee, who developed Standard Process, and just kind of a little history of him, he was a peculiar young man, right? So he was truly a genius. If you look back at it, even at like 12 or 13 years old, he had this knack for wanting to know more about nutrition and physiology and all this. And some of the old literature I read about him said he would come home and read to his sisters physics books. Can you imagine? So I made him a really weird 12-year-old, you know what I'm saying? So he actually, where he went to high school, he, by the time he got to high school, had known so much about physics that there wasn't a class that was like he'd surpassed.
It wasn't new to him anymore.
So listen to this, right? High schooler goes to the principal and says, we need an advanced physics class. And the guy said, okay, well, the only way we're going to do it is if you teach it. So he had 15 students sign up as a high school, teaching them physics. So from that, anyhow, Lee was a genius that he loved to figure things out. I had a chance to look into his personal library at one time, and he loved books. He would collect things on just everything, whether it was just the joy of reading or understanding, breakdowns of how engines worked and all that kind of stuff. So he was a guy that would tinker a good bit with electronics and all that. And he started working in a facility that worked on electrical motors and things like that. And one of the things they were working on was dental motors. And so at that time, dental motors were driven by pulleys and belts and all this, and they'd spin the dental drill to try to drill teeth. And there wasn't this variable speed motor thing that they learned to do. So he realized, if I am going to try to improve this thing, I got to start thinking like a dentist. So he went to dental school. I mean, again, this is how this guy thinks, right? So he gets a degree in dentistry. And as he was doing that at Marquette University, he noticed that a lot of dental problems were due to malnutrition. And that's where he started really to study nutrition.
Yeah.
Now, interesting enough, he suffered from colds and had an immune system wasn't strong for a long period of time. And so he found through nutrition this combination of vitamins B and vitamin C that he started to get from food. He said, here's like nutritional yeast and things like this that has these different vitamin derivatives in it. And when he took this solution, his immune system improved.
Yeah.
So his mother had a cardiovascular problem, a heart problem, ended up giving her this solution. She got better. So then they started giving it to family members, and they said, hey, we got to share this with everybody. So they kind of started this thing of saying, hey, we got to get this product out to more people. And they kind of went door to door selling this thing. And so what he found is when he took it to the pharmaceutical companies, they wanted research right? And at that time, I think the reading says it was like $200,000, which now would be like 7 or 8 million,
Yeah.
right? To do the studies to say, and he was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. So they formed their own vitamin company.
Mhm.
And then from that, he said, how do we make this more complete, not just B's and C vitamins? What are the things that we are lacking in our diet? Now, listen, this is in 1920.
Wow.
Think about that, 100
Yeah.
years, right?
Yeah.
So if we look at deficiency in soil 100 years ago compared to now, we're way more deficient,
Right.
right? We've depleted our topsoil, we haven't replenished properly, and as a result, or we add synthetic fertilizers and things in there trying to get those levels back up to normal. But nonetheless, he produced a supplement called Catalin, which was a whole food multivitamin. And when that was done, he said, okay, my work's done here. And it wasn't until practitioners started using it and then came about and said, well, listen, I have an individual that has XYZ. Can we do something with that? So then he started this whole company that looked at, supplementation of nutritional deficiencies, which led us to what's now known as standard process whole food supplements. But I think what was unique about Lee was that it was always about how we pull the material from the foods to keep it in its natural state. So he created, again, with his technical genius, a vacuum extraction way that those products, those veggies and fruits and things they use, never go over a certain temperature around 70 some degrees as they're pulling those nutrients out. It's never heat liable. When you heat certain vitamins and nutrients, you break them down.
Right.
By breakdown, I mean you distort them. You distort their configuration.
So they would no longer be considered a whole food.
You got, well, not only a whole food, your body doesn't recognize it. It could be the opposite and rotation appearance of the vitamin. So now the body looks at it and says, well, that kind of looks like that, but that's not really it. Maybe I can use it, maybe I can't. And so that's where all supplements are not created equal. And Lee often said it's not this fight between whole food supplements and synthetics. Synthetics will work.
Right.
Right. You have a person like we've seen that with what we've just went through with the pandemic. And we'll pick on vitamin C since that was one that there was kind of used through that. So most vitamin C in our country is sold as ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid is the outside antioxidant portion of vitamin C. Yeah. So in the vitamin C cataplex from a food-based source, you've got P factor, you've got rutin, you've got bioflavonoids. You have all these things that are lacking when you're taking just ascorbic acid.
Just ascorbic acid.
Okay, so what happens? I take ascorbic acid, goes into my body. The body says, ascorbic acid, that's part of vitamin C. And now it will start to pull from your vitamin reserves, right? Or the foods that you're eating to make the C cataplex. So short term, you're going to notice a difference. Oh, wow, I took that. I see a difference. Now, over a period of time, think back to the people again. We're eating foods that are lacking this. You're not producing the whole factor. And as a result, now I created a deficiency. So that's why oftentimes people say, well, I took some vitamins, they worked for a while, and then they quit working.
Yeah.
Well, it's the fact that they're missing all the things that plug in to make it work right? So again, vitamin C, there's multiple components to that family. I'm one, John's one, Bennett. If I pull John out of that Bennett family, I can do a little bit, but if you put my whole family in there, we can do a whole lot more. Right. And so that's where it's always better to get that, like in this case, vitamin C from a food base that has the bioflavonoids, rutin, P factor, all that stuff in it.
So let me ask you this. I think the one big question that people have is, okay, do I have to, obviously just kind of along the lines of healthy foods, or like whole food supplements are also an extra added cost. Is this long-term for me? Is this forever for me? Will I have to buy these forever? Is it your philosophy that, somebody will have to be on these supplements long-term forever?
Yes. Yeah. With what's happening in our society right now, absolutely. In my opinion. I mean, I'm just being honest with my patients. Now, I always tell my patients, you get the chance to choose that. Yeah. So if you do things to change your lifestyle and diet, then you're going to need less and less of the supplements. You cannot out-supplement a bad diet. Right. That being said, my goal is not to sell you a ton of supplements and keep you on them the rest of my life or the rest of your life. I'm sorry. Mine's to provide for you the things that we need to plug the holes to allow you to function at your highest level. And I get it. I mean, there's times where, people will say, from an economic standpoint, I can't quite afford it or whatever it may be. But what I try to do is I try to get them to look where they're spending the money. Most of the time, also, Brandy, it's not a money issue. I'll be honest with you. Even in West Virginia, it's a priority issue.
Yeah.
Right.
We see that
You got a
everywhere,
client
yeah.
that comes in, smokes a pack of cigarettes a day, and they say, oh, I can't afford to take Catalan. Give me a break.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Choices.
Yeah. So how about we just start with you quit smoking, right? That'll help tremendously. And you'll have less need for vitamin C and A
Yeah.
and everything else. So, but yeah, it's just getting them to realize kind of where that's at and what's going on. And then I guess the next question, people always say, well, why are your supplements so good? Or why standard process? And I said, well, I only give my family the best. So if you don't want to give your family the best, I totally understand. Go buy something cheaper. No, I'm just kidding. So what I love about standard process is they treat their supplements, and I've been to their factory several times. Like when I decided to bring them into my office, I was like, I want to know what's going on with this. I want to know how this company works. Is it a good company? And I think that's what people need to do. Research your companies.
Yeah.
Right. So what does this company stand for? They're using a lot of fillers, and I'll ask people that. How did they pull that out of there? Did they heat it? Because once you heat it, it's, oh, I don't know. I said, well, call the company and find out.
Right.
So I went to standard process. I looked at what they did through research and development. They can tell you, this is the coolest thing. And I always tell people, if you get a chance to go to Palmyra, Wisconsin, and why in the world it's there? That's the next question. People say, well, why in the world is it in Wisconsin? Palmyra, when you look at the glacier beds, the soil in Palmyra is so dark and rich. It's almost black in nature because it's so rich in nutrient content.
Yeah.
Right. That's the harvest belt. If you look at America, that's where most of our stuff's produced, the farming's done, and all those kind of things in those kind of Midwest countries or states. I'm sorry, or middle of our state or country. And so when they look at research and development, let's say they're using kale or Brussels sprouts, they'll take that product. They know when it was planted in the field. Excuse me. They know when it was harvested. They know when it came into research and development. When they break it down, pull the food extract out, they'll test it at that point. If it's not high enough in those nutrients, they won't use it.
Wow.
They'll put it back in the soil, crop rotate. They'll use it for another one. They won't put it back in the broccoli field. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that nutrient goes right back into the soil again to produce the next lot of product that they're going to have come out. Then let's say it passes that point, they go to capsulating it, right? Whether it be through a capsule or a caplet or whatever it may be, or a tab. And then they take it off the shelves again and test it again to make sure that caplet has it in there.
Wow.
Like what they do through how they treat their supplements is kind of how I treat a client. You pre-test, you post-test. Is it really making a change? And so I know when I recommend that supplement to a client, I know how it's going to work. I know what its efficacy is. I know that it's going to, what's on that label is going to be in there. And I can go back and show the testing that's been done on it. That's the thing that was so neat to me. So, and that's where, from that, being able to see that, I said, that's what I want for my people. I want it as close as food as I can possibly get. And to be able to provide those things that they may be lacking in their diet. So
right, like you said, plugging the holes there.
Plugging the holes. Yeah.
Right. So I think the thing that I appreciate most about you as a practitioner is the fact that you educate, because I'm one of those people that I like to ask a lot of questions. I really like to understand what's the processes are, and that's just my personality.
Yeah.
And you have always been really good at saying, all right, this is something that I think that maybe we should introduce that can kind of plug one of those holes. And this is why, this is how it works. So then the decision is on me, yes, whether or not it's not, here's a bag full, go home, take it. You may not understand what's happening, but I do. And that's all that matters. Yes. I've never felt like that, in your office. And I greatly appreciate the education behind what you do. You spend a great amount of time really educating your patients. You are very popular in Morgantown. I and many friends see you and have nothing but very glowing things to say about how you practice. And I think one thing that is very important to me is that, and just kind of your connection with your clients. And I want to say that, and I want to say that very publicly. Yeah. It feels like kind of a community when you come in. It feels very, the names of my kids, and there are other patients in there when I come in and you're talking to them about what they did last week, and so I think that having a relationship with your practitioner as far as that goes and really connecting, I think is very important. So I think people need to know that is finding somebody who you really trust to answer your questions. And so that you can feel completely comfortable walking out of there, that you've got the best care possible, because I don't think that that is the standard of care that most of us get in general. And I think that a lot of people can take a page out of your book as far as that goes. So that is me giving my 2 cents about you as a practitioner. And we are so grateful to have you in Morgantown.
Whoop, whoop.
So,
I appreciate that. And it means I've created what I've tried to create. So Brandy, I look at my practice as a flower bed.
yeah.
I've got tons of flowers in my flower bed, and I don't plant weeds in my flower bed.
Right.
Right. So the reality is that it all starts with a conversation. I always tell people, especially when they're trying to send friends, family, and things like that, let's sit down, have a conversation, see if I'm the right person for you. If I'm not, we'll find you the right person. But you have to be comfortable with the practitioner you're working with.
Yeah.
And as far as education is concerned, you're kind of like me, right? So there's 3 levels of that. There's need to know, nice to know, and where to go. And you and I are where to go people. Hey, let me see the research behind that, right?
Yeah.
Some people just say, tell me why I need to take it, and I'm on my way.
Yeah.
And so we always try to meet them at their level where they need to be, and provide that information, because you can paralyze people with too much information, right? Paralysis by analysis.
Right.
Give them all this info, and then they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Right. So
yeah. Too much.
Yep.
Just tell me what to do.
Yeah. And think about it. I mean, and that's a neat point right there too. So if I just had this discussion with the client this week, I said, listen, I'm not going to try to totally 180 turn your life around and everything. She was 70 some years old. She's got habits for 70 years. Mm-hmm. But I said, if I can help you become 1% better a week, in a year from now, we're 50% better.
Right.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Like, think about that. So just a little shift or change can make such a difference in your world. So people come in and say, well, I don't want to join a gym. I don't want to exercise. I say, just start walking.
Right.
Right. Or females specifically. Let's say, I don't have time to exercise. I got kids. I got this. Or I said, how many times do you go to the bathroom a day? Oh, I don't know. Maybe 6, 12. I say, every time you go to the bathroom, I want you to do 10 squats, before you sit down and use the bathroom. Right.
Lunge all the way to the bathroom.
There you go. Right. So all of a sudden I've changed my lifestyle, and they're like, my goodness, that really made a difference. Right. So it's little thing, meeting people where they're at, encouraging them, because listen, I truly believe that God doesn't make junk, right? That we are created in a likeness of a king. And I know I kind of go back heavy on that, but that's me. That's my personality. And that's what we talk about in my practice. And that as long as you provide it the nutrients it needs and remove the stress and interference, it can function at a high level. That's vitalism. Right. And that's what true health really is to me. To whatever that level might be for that patient. There can be genetic things that might change that. And there can be incidences where accidents or something create physical problems that those tissues can't regenerate, but your body always resets to health, and healing is a normal process. Mm-hmm. Disease is not a normal process, right? But your body's not designed to die or to be born into the world and then be manifested with disease. Disease is an outside in principle. It's the things that we're doing. It's epigenetics, if you will, that create those issues or problems. So yeah,
that's fantastic. Well, like I said, I'm really grateful for this conversation, and I'm grateful that we finally got to have it recorded and on air, because these are the kinds of things that we talk about when I come into your office anyway. So if people, especially in our area, want to touch base with you, get in contact with you, how can they do that?
Absolutely. So they can go to drjohnbennett.com. That'll take them directly to our website. You'll see a lot of resources on our website. Our information's on there, a little bit about our family, and so they can get an inside look of who I am and what it is that we do. We consult with clients all over the country. And so we do virtual consultations. And if chiropractic is needed with certain people, we'll find them a chiropractor in the area of the country that we're in. But that's the easiest way to connect with us. Okay. On there's a simple box that says, hey, I want to have a conversation. So they can click that link, and it'll notify us that we'll contact you and say, what's going on, what's happening in your journey, how can we partner together and maybe help you along the way. Mm-hmm. And Brandy, I just want to say, people always ask me that. They say, well, I don't know how to refer people in, or that stigma of you're a chiropractor and all this. And I said, here's the easiest way. Tell them it doesn't cost a penny to talk to me.
Right.
right? All you gotta do is make the call, set up a time, let's have a discussion for 15, 20 minutes and see if it makes sense. And if so, then we'll figure out how do we move forward from there. So, yep.
That's great. That's
Yep.
great. Well, Dr. Bennett, I really appreciate it. I will add all of that into the show notes too, for everybody to get a hold of you, and also any materials that were included in our conversation that you want to add, I'll put those in there as well.
Sounds great.
So thank you so much.
Brandy, thank you. It's been a blessing, and it really means a lot that you would ask me to come on and kind of share with you what we do on our journey, and for you and I to work together on this, because I know your heart's about helping people too. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.